digital radio and the ABC Radio app. This is Drive with Adam Shirley on ABC Radio Canberra.
Chances are better than not that the next public function you attend in the ACT, there will be a time in the proceedings that the traditional Indigenous owners of the land will be recognised. Welcome to Country and Acknowledgement of Country is widely observed in some parts at events as varied as government functions to wedding ceremonies. But do you understand why they are performed and what they actually mean? Scott Kneebone is a presenter at Ask Me Anything. It's an organisation that does exactly what it says on the tin. Scott, a pleasure to see you and thank you for coming by Drive today.
No, pleasure to be here. Before I get started, I'd like to pay my respects and like to acknowledge the Indigenous traditional owners here in the Canberra region. Also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to any Indigenous listeners we have with us today.
These are some wonderful phrases in this Reconciliation Week especially that some Canberrans might be accustomed to listening. How often do you find, though, people aren't fully aware of the background, the reason for acknowledgement or welcome to country?
Last year, during Reconciliation Week, I actually went down to my children's primary school and I did some cultural appreciation with these kids. Now, they're 8 years old, 6 years old, and this is some of the first experiences they've had with learning about Indigenous culture. And I sat down with them and we explained what does an acknowledgement and what does a welcome to country mean and how they're different. Now, we often teach our kids how to be polite, what etiquette is when they go to a birthday party. And acknowledgement and welcome can be similar to that. So when our kids go to birthday parties, you say, thank you for having me. And that's the same as an acknowledgement of country. It's saying thank you. Now, welcome to country is when it's your turn to host a birthday party, you say to your guests, welcome, thanks you for coming. Now, welcome to country is very similar. So a welcome country can only be given by the traditional owners of that land. Someone else can't do it. An acknowledgement, though, if you're there, you can say thank you.
And as far as how well that analogy, which I love, I might say, sits with people and makes them understand that difference, have you found it to be very reliable and successful?
Yeah, so when it's also about saying yes and thank you and etiquette, but it's also about showing respect for how long people have been here. So when you've been at a particular house for a long period of time, even if you've moved away and you come back as a tourist, you'll often go back past that house you lived in for a decade or so. And you want to show your family, oh, this is where I lived, and my mother-in-law, she loves doing this when I go around on trips with her. And my last holidays, we went up to Mackay and we did it up there. Now, when you come back and you want to do this, it's about that link to land and place is very important. Now, if you've lived in a house for a decade, you want to go back and check it out. If you've been in a place with a couple more zeros behind the number, you have a real connection there. And acknowledgement and welcome tap into those emotions.
How varied is acknowledgement and welcome depending on which part of Australia you're in?
It's not only varied by location, but by significance of the event you're commemorating, along with history. Now, a welcome to country in very traditional times would have been quite a complex process, but then it was also about showing respect for each other and providing assistance. So then after that, we'd go through the general negotiations about, okay, this is where you can stay and this is where you can hunt. But acknowledgement is something quite more modern.
Who should perform each of them? You mentioned before that traditional owners are the ones who have the responsibility, the authority to do a welcome for country. What about an acknowledgement of country?
This happened one time. We were out doing an Ask Me Anything session and we were just starting out and I was asked to do an acknowledgement and I had the words written up on a piece of paper as most good public speakers do. But in this case, I actually went and picked out one of the Year 9 students out at Radford College and walked up and pointed out this young guy, and I actually knew his auntie. And so I knew his name, I knew he'd hurt his leg, and I went up there and introduced him, and can you please read out this acknowledgement of country?
Did he know that was coming?
No. This is all about connection to people as well, which I often hear about with Indigenous people. So anybody can do an acknowledgement of country. It's like you get it. Anybody, it's about paying your respects to the people who first inhabited this area. So everybody should do one.
So how did that go down in that example? I'd love to know how he handled it.
I'd also heard from example, he was a bit one of those class larrikins. So he took it on the chin. He spoke beautifully. His friends gave him a ribbing, which is where I really wanted to achieve with that. And he was over the moon when he spoke to his mum that evening and going, this guy I knew no contact with previously. He knew my name. He knew I was hurt. And why was I picked out? And it was like, it's about connection to people and through that also to place.
And inherently, is that responsibility important for people, if they're not Indigenous, to have that responsibility to acknowledge that they're on traditional lands?
Yes, it's important to show respect, but that's only one part of the story. Now, when I went into the primary school and taught the children there about the difference between acknowledgement and welcome, it was about and teaching them about showing respect. Now, that assembly the following week, the school has been traditionally every week doing the acknowledgement to country, as you'd expect at a school assembly. Now, prior to that lesson, they understood what was happening, but they didn't understand the why. So now they understood why we do it. And he was all excited about the school's actually going, they're doing an acknowledgement. I know what that means now. I'm excited. He was excited about people showing him respect. And having that positive influence on culture and his upbringing has massive effects about raising his self-awareness about culture and identity, but also building up his resilience as he goes through life.
I'd love to pick up on that last point. As far as excitement for people who are Indigenous and non-Indigenous, how does their excitement level rise when they start to look at the why of welcome to an acknowledgement of country?
If you don't explain the why about acknowledgement of country, people that don't understand the purpose or the reasoning. Now, if you don't understand that, you can't fully show respect. You can't be sincere about why you're doing your acknowledgement. If you don't know why, it's just words. As soon as you start explaining why, and we'll have to keep having this conversation over and over again as more and more people start listening or new people come along. Knowing the why, explain, it helps you build up your awareness of the respect that needs there. It's an important thing to do.
Absolutely. Scott, are there any times when a welcome or acknowledgement to country are not appropriate?
When it's not appropriate? That's an interesting one. Often people assume that anything Indigenous related must have an acknowledgement of country. And often the implementation of this over the breadth of issues that it goes to. You probably should hear one at a local council meeting. But you may not hear one at the local football match or at a boardroom about economics. So it's there's an awareness there, but it's the breadth of it's slowly expanding more and more.
Adam Shirley with me on Drive, our special guest, Scott Kneebone, presenter at Ask Me Anything, and he's explaining the key of welcome to country and acknowledgement of country in the public context for Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australia and the differences between them. It is 10 degrees currently in town. I mentioned at the introduction, Scott, that welcome to country and acknowledgement of country appears to be becoming more common at various public events. Do Indigenous people welcome that?
Yes, very much so. It's an awareness raising about the role we've played in Australia's history. So there's a difference between 60,000 years and 200 years. So our knowledge and our legends often come from real-life events. So if you go back through history, as these stories develop and evolve over time, they become greater and greater impact. Now, paying respects to those is an important thing. We do the same thing with sporting stories. You know, we see our legends on the sporting field, kick a winning goal or win a grand final, and over the years, those stories grow and become part of the culture of the club. Many Indigenous stories started out in many of the same ways. It's
an interesting text here from Frank on 0467922666. He says, this idea of respect for traditional owners should be taken further. The land on which I live or the recipient lives should be included in an address of mail as standard along with a postcode. It helps build awareness. Interesting point from Frank there as far as including an Indigenous name or title to the address of someone or someone's address if they're sending it out on a letter perhaps.
Yeah. Many of Australia's town names are Indigenous words. Wagga Wagga is a very common one. But in northeast Victoria, there's a small town called Mungie. tiny, very small farming community, but it actually means fish in my native language.
Righto.
So those places are often included in our names of towns and places, but we're also now seeing it now on when you change boundaries for local shires, you'll see Ngunnawal country or Ngambri country.
And suburbs in Canberra too.
Yes, very much
There's
so.
quite a bit of nomenclature there.
But incorporating more of these names into our places would be a good step forward.
And as far as more people wanting to give an acknowledgement of country, is there standard learning or, I guess, workshopping or something like that, searching for the right word, so that they can do an approved one which is suitable at any given event they're hosting?
Getting approved suitable words is an interesting process to go through, and it's not necessarily a formal one either. So the words vary depending on the organisation, and it's about the level of respect they want to show or those types of things. But if you're worried about the words and whether it's appropriate, reach out to your local community. Speak to some of the local elders, build up the relationship and go, how would you like to be acknowledged? How would you like to be respected as we open up these ceremonies?
It's wonderful to hear some of the heritage, the background to this, but obviously how it is increasing and how it's a good thing as far as properly acknowledging our Indigenous history. All the very best, Scott, and thank you very much for coming by today.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.